You think you can buy me, Mason? You think your money can fix this? I spat, glaring at my husband across the dimly lit hotel room. Mason simply grinned, unfazed by my outburst. Everything has a price, Maddie, even loyalty. His casual arrogance infuriated me further. How could the man I once loved twist into this callous, manipulative stranger? Our 2-year marriage had become a battlefield of power struggles and emotional warfare. I drew a shaky breath, fighting back tears. This isn't about money. It's about trust, respect, things your wealth can't buy. Mason shrugged, loosening his silk tie. Keep telling yourself that, dear. We both know your principles are just pretty words to make you feel better about yourself. As he sauntered past me, the scent of his expensive cologne sickened me. This lavish trip was supposed to be a romantic getaway, a chance to rekindle our fading connection. Instead, it had devolved into another toxic clash over his obsession with status and control. I sank onto the plush hotel bed, cradling my head in trembling hands. How had we fallen so far? Memories flooded my mind, the early days of our courtship, when Mason's charm and ambition had swept me off my feet. Now those same qualities had twisted into a dark, possessive force, slowly consuming the man I loved. A muffled buzz from my purse jolted me back to reality. Retrieving my phone, I saw Sandra's name flashing on the screen. Hello? My voice cracked with barely contained emotion. Maddie, are you okay? My best friend's familiar voice instantly grounded me. You sound upset. I glanced toward the ensuite bathroom, where the shower had started running. Lowering my voice, I confided, It's Mason again. He's become completely obsessed with appearances and living this wealthy fantasy life. I'm so tired of fighting, Sandra. There was a pause before she responded, her tone gentle but firm. You know he's not going to change, Maddie. The real question is, how much of yourself are you willing to sacrifice for this marriage? Her words hung heavy in the air, the bitter truth I'd been avoiding for months. I squeezed my eyes shut, feeling the world I'd built with Mason crumbling around me. In that moment, I made a silent vow. No matter how painful the battle ahead, I would reclaim the life I deserved, a life of freedom, independence, and self-respect. Starting today, the rules of engagement were changing. The sleek downtown apartment reeked of Mason's arrogance. Every inch screamed nouveau riche, from the gaudy gold accents to the obnoxiously large flat-screen TV dominating the living room. What do you think? Mason spread his arms wide, that infuriating grin plastered across his face. I had the place redecorated while you were at work. A little gift for my hard-working wife. I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to hurl the crystal vase beside me across the room. You did all this without consulting me? He waved a dismissive hand. Details, Maddie. You've been so buried in that corporate rat race, I figured a little luxury was in order. Grinding my teeth, I surveyed the cold, impersonal space that had once been our warm, inviting home. The cozy reading nook I'd cherished was now occupied by a hideous marble statue, some bizarre attempt at appearing cultured. Mason sauntered over, wrapping a possessive arm around my waist. Don't be ungrateful, dear. This is the life we deserve, the life I'm building for us. I tensed at his touch, his words ringing hollow. For him, this grotesque display of wealth was a twisted expression of love. For me, it felt like a gilded cage. Forcing a tight smile, I met his gaze. It's certainly a change. But shouldn't we have discussed this first? It was our home, not just yours. His eyes narrowed fractionally. You never seem to have time for those kinds of discussions anymore. I'm just taking the initiative like any good husband would. There it was, that subtle jab, planting seeds of guilt I didn't deserve. I opened my mouth to protest, but the shrill ring of my cell phone cut me off. Excuse me, I muttered, stepping away to take the call. A welcome distraction from this suffocating situation. As I spoke with Sandra about an upcoming work event, I could feel Mason's eyes boring into me from across the room. His impatience was palpable, that unspoken demand for my undivided attention. When I finally ended the call, he was waiting with folded arms and a disapproving scowl. Work again? When are you going to start prioritizing us, Maddie? The accusation stung, despite its familiarity. I am prioritizing us, I countered. My career allows us to live this lifestyle you seem so obsessed with. His jaw tightened. Don't get defensive. I'm just saying there's more to life than chasing that next promotion. We're supposed to be partners, remember? I bit back the urge to scream. His words rang hollow, a cruel irony given how little regard he showed for my input or autonomy. This apartment makeover was just the latest example of his controlling behavior, his desperate need to dictate every aspect of our lives. Mustering what remained of my patience, I forced a smile. "You're right, Mason. Why don't we discuss having some friends over soon? A little housewarming party could be fun." His face brightened instantly at the suggestion. "Excellent idea. I'll handle all the arrangements." As he turned away, already lost in visions of grandeur, a sinking feeling gripped my chest. What had I just agreed to? Another event for him to orchestrate and me to suffer through, no doubt. But I knew voicing any objection now would only ignite another battle. One I didn't have the energy to fight. Not tonight. So I kept my plastered smile intact and retreated to the bedroom, my temporary sanctuary from the gilded prison Mason was creating around us. The office hummed with the usual frantic energy as I stepped off the elevator. Emails, meetings, deadlines, the corporate machine demanded constant fuel. "Morning, Maddie." Peter fell into stride beside me, clutching a stack of files. "Big day ahead. Jillian wants an update on the Henson acquisition by noon." I nodded, forcing a tight smile. "Shouldn't be a problem. I'll have those projections ready to go." His brow furrowed slightly. "You all right? You seem tense." Brushing off his concern, I quickened my pace. Just another day in paradise. As we parted ways, I couldn't shake the nagging weight that had settled over me. Mason's redecorating stunt still gnawed at me, a glaring symbol of how little autonomy I truly had. By the time I reached my desk, my cell was already buzzing with a flurry of texts from him. "Don't forget, the caterers are coming at 6 to start setting up. I ordered those ridiculously expensive imported wines you love so much. This party is going to be incredible. You're going to love all the surprises I have planned." I pinched the bridge of my nose, gritting my teeth. Of course he'd gone overboard, turning a simple housewarming into another garish display of wealth, and of course I'd have zero say in any of it. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of spreadsheets and status reports. I forced myself to remain focused, determined not to let Mason's latest power play derail my career. But as the evening crept closer, that old familiar dread set in. I could already envision the phony smiles, the backhanded compliments thinly veiled as jokes. Mason's wealthy friends sneering at me, mocking my obsession with work, while their vapid wives sipped overpriced wine and gossiped. By 6 o'clock I was running on fumes, physically and emotionally exhausted before the night had even begun. I dragged myself through the front door, bracing for the onslaught. The pounding bass of hired musicians assaulted me first. Then the kaleidoscope of lights and overdecorated tables crammed into our once cozy living room. "Maddie!" Mason swept over, reeking of expensive scotch. "You're just in time for the big reveal." Before I could protest, he grabbed my hand and yanked me toward the kitchen. With a flourish, he flung open the doors to our newly renovated dining room. My jaw dropped. The space had been completely gutted and transformed into some sort of grotesque banquet hall, all gleaming mahogany and heavy drapery. "Surprised?" Mason grinned like a child on Christmas morning. I could only gape in stunned silence. This was our home, not a hotel ballroom. He mistook my shock for delight, pulling me into an unwanted embrace. "I knew you'd love it. This is just the beginning, my dear. Just wait until I show you the other renovations I have planned." His words hit like a sucker punch, stealing what little breath remained in my lungs. Other renovations? This nightmare was only getting started. I pulled back, fixing him with a steely glare. "You did all this without my input? After I explicitly asked you to consult me first?" His smile faltered, twisting into a sneer. "You never have time for that kind of thing anyway. I'm simply doing what's best for us, for our future." There it was again, that sickening air of self-righteousness, masking his utter disregard for my wants or opinions. A harsh truth settled in my gut. Mason would never change. This obsession with status and control ran too deep. As the party raged around us, I felt the first flickerings of defiance spark within me. If he thought I would simply surrender to this gilded life he was forcing upon me, he was gravely mistaken. This was war now, and I would fight with everything I had to regain control of my life. The stuffy restaurant reeked of pretentiousness. Waiters in crisp uniforms flitted between tables, catering to the city's elite with rehearsed obsequiousness. I shifted uncomfortably in my seat, tugging at the neckline of my silk blouse. Mason had insisted I wear this ridiculously expensive outfit for our monthly family dinner. "Appearances are everything, darling," he'd purred, presenting the garment bag like it contained the crown jewels. Just another not-so-subtle reminder that he expected me to play the role of the perfect, polished wife. Across the table, Mason's brother Jacob leaned in, his voice a conspiratorial whisper. "So, Maddie, any big career moves on the horizon? The way you've been climbing the corporate ladder, I wouldn't be surprised if you're gunning for the C-suite soon." I forced a tight smile, well-versed in deflecting such probing questions. "Just taking it one day at a time. You know how these things go." A faux casual shrug. "Well, if you ever need an investment opportunity, you let me know. I've got some incredible prospects lined up that could really maximize your earnings." Before I could respond, Mason interjected with a booming laugh. "No need to be so modest, dear. We're already putting the wheels in motion." He turned to Jacob with a wink. "In fact, I was thinking we could invest in your latest venture. Consider it a welcome to the family gift." My fork clattered to the plate. "Excuse me? You're making investment decisions without consulting me now?" Mason's expression hardened briefly before melting into that carefully practiced smirk. "Of course I ran the numbers first. This is a can't-miss opportunity, and it only makes sense to keep wealth in the family. Don't you agree?" There it was again, that patronizing, belittling tone, as if I were some clueless child needing guidance on basic financial matters. I opened my mouth, ready to unleash the torrent of fury bubbling within me. But one look at Jacob's eager, oblivious face, and I faltered. This wasn't his fight, at least not yet. I wouldn't let Mason manipulate his own brother into getting caught in the crossfire of our war. So I swallowed my rage, pasting on a saccharine smile. "Well, as long as you've done your due diligence, I suppose keeping it in the family makes sense." The words left a bitter taste in my mouth, but Mason looked delighted. "That's my girl, always supportive of her hard-working husband's business endeavors." He leaned over, planting a cloying kiss on my cheek. I fought the urge to recoil from his touch. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of strained conversation and forced laughter. All the while, a storm raged within me: hurt, anger, and a growing sense of determination. By the time we arrived back home, I could no longer contain my fury. "What gives you the right?" I rounded on Mason the second the front door closed behind us. He feigned innocence, loosening his tie. "I'm simply looking out for our future like any good provider." "Our future?" I scoffed, hurling my clutch across the room. It struck a hideous marble statue with a dull thud. "Or your delusional quest to stroke your own ego by throwing money around?" His eyes flashed dangerously. "Don't be dramatic. This is about building a legacy, securing our family's financial stability for generations. By lying and making unilateral decisions that impact both our lives?" I shook my head in disgust. "You don't get to play the benevolent patriarch card, Mason, not after everything you've done to undermine me." For a long moment he said nothing. That veneer of shallow charm cracked, revealing the ugliness that lurked beneath. When he finally spoke, his voice dripped with venom. "You'll regret this defiance, Maddie. You can't survive without me and my money protecting you." I met his gaze, unflinching. "I don't need your protection, but you'd better start watching your back." As he stalked off, I felt a strange sense of clarity wash over me. The battle lines had been drawn. This was no longer just about reclaiming my autonomy. It was all-out war, and I would stop at nothing to take Mason down. The conference room buzzed with anticipation as the leadership team filed in. Today's meeting could make or break the company's biggest deal of the year, and my future promotion. I smoothed my skirt, forcing a calm demeanor despite the butterflies in my stomach. After months of tireless negotiations, we were finally ready to present our acquisition proposal. Jillian, our no-nonsense CEO, rapped her knuckles on the glossy table. "All right, people, let's get started. Maddie, you're up first." I rose with a confident nod, calling up the meticulously crafted slides. This was my moment to shine, to prove I deserved that coveted VP role. But before I could utter a word, the double doors burst open with a bang. All heads swiveled as Mason strode in, trailed by two sharply dressed associates. "Apologies for the interruption, folks." He flashed that trademark grin, not an ounce of contrition in his voice. but I believe we have an exciting opportunity to discuss. Stunned silence gripped the room as realization dawned. He was crashing this critical meeting, no doubt to push another self-serving agenda. Jillian's eyes narrowed dangerously. I'm sorry. Who are you? This is a private corporate event. Mason chuckled, completely unfazed. Mason Carson, at your service. I'm an advisor of sorts, here to offer my esteemed expertise. He swept an arm toward his lackeys. These brilliant minds have engineered a revolutionary new investment strategy that will utterly transform your profit margins. My heart pounded as 20 pairs of eyes shifted toward me. The wife, the one who should have reined in this brazen interloper. Clearing my throat, I managed a tremulous smile. Mason, this is highly inappropriate. We're in the middle of securing a major corporate deal, one that's been months in the making. He scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. Pish-posh, this little acquisition is child's play compared to the opportunities I have to offer. Just hear me out for 5 minutes. The audacity of his words stole my breath. He was steamrolling my career, my proudest accomplishment, all in pursuit of massaging his own ego. White-hot fury blazed within me, but I choked it down. I refused to give him the satisfaction of a public meltdown, not in front of my respected colleagues. So I simply nodded, keeping my expression impassive. Very well. 5 minutes. Mason beamed, launching into his predictably grandiose spiel about disrupting the market and leveling the playing field. I tuned out the empty corporate jargon, focusing instead on the stunned, almost pitying looks from my teammates. They knew. They all saw straight through his blustering charade, his desperate grab for significance at my expense. In that moment, any lingering professional credibility I'd earned disintegrated into embarrassment and shame by association. By the time Mason's 5 minutes mercifully ended, the atmosphere had grown painfully tense. Jillian's jaw was set in a rigid line, her eyes boring into me with a mixture of disappointment and reproach. Thank you for that illuminating perspective, Mr. Carson. Her tone dripped with icy sarcasm. But I think we'll stick to the strategy my team has already spent months developing. She rose abruptly, effectively dismissing the entire fiasco with her body language. We'll reconvene tomorrow to finalize the acquisition details. Everyone is dismissed, except you, Maddie. We need to talk. A heavy silence hung in the air as the others trickled out, carefully avoiding eye contact with me. Even Mason had the sense to slink away, his bravado dimmed in the face of failure. Once we were alone, Gillian fixed me with a stern look. I'm sorry, Maddie, but I have to ask, is this a pattern we should be concerned about? Your husband's outbursts undermining company interests? The words struck deep, bringing all my shortcomings and vulnerabilities into harsh relief, but they also crystallized my resolve. Meeting her gaze steadily, I spoke in a tone that brooked no argument. This won't happen again. You have my word. And in that moment, I made a vow to myself. By whatever means necessary, I would neutralize the threat Mason posed to my life and career. No more playing nice, no more turning the other cheek to his manipulation. It was time to fight fire with fire. The apartment felt like a battlefield, tense, charged with unspoken hostilities. I eyed Mason warily as he nursed a glass of scotch, pretending to review documents scattered across the coffee table. Big day tomorrow, I said, keeping my tone carefully neutral. I'll need you to stay out of my way at the office. He flashed that infuriatingly smug grin. Now, why would I do that? I'm simply looking out for our best interests, as always. My jaw clenched at the blatant lie. After his disastrous ambush, Jillian had issued a firm directive. Mason was prohibited from company premises until further notice. But I knew better than to remind him directly. Any confrontation would only invite his wrath. No, I needed to play this smarter, gather the evidence to take him down once and for all. Forcing an airy laugh, I settled onto the sofa beside him. Of course, dear. I'm just feeling a bit stressed about this merger, that's all. Perhaps you could find a way to support me from here? Take some things off my plate? His brow furrowed skeptically before that smooth mask of charm resurfaced. You know I'd do anything to ease your burdens, my love. He reached over, giving my thigh a condescending pat. I fought not to recoil from his touch. Actually, there is one little task that would be immensely helpful. Leaning closer, I lowered my voice conspiratorially. You've always been so shrewd with our investment portfolio. If you could just keep an eye on our accounts, maybe identify some opportunities to maximize our profits." His eyes lit up with undisguised greed. "Say no more, darling. Consider it handled." Hook, line, and sinker. I hid my triumphant smile, pressing a chaste kiss to his whiskered cheek. "You're the best, Mason." For the next several days, I watched and waited, maintaining my facade of adoring wife, while he pored over financial statements. All the while, my phone secretly recorded our every interaction, documenting the depths of his deception. "Look at these projections," he'd exclaim gleefully, brandishing some bogus analysis. "If we funnel our money into this investment vehicle, we could triple our net worth in 2 years." I'd murmur the expected oohs and ahs, playing the enraptured partner while mentally cataloging each and every fraudulent claim. His arrogance made him sloppy, eager to impress me with his supposed business acumen. He'd leave damning paperwork and emails scattered carelessly around our home office. One evening, I hit the ultimate jackpot, an incriminating phone conversation with his legal team, blatantly discussing how to shield illicit funds from tax audits. I stood in the hallway, clutching my phone with trembling hands as I recorded every word. This was it, the smoking gun to obliterate his charade once and for all. When he finally ended the call, I emerged with a placid smile. "Good news from your lawyers, I take it?" Mason startled, his cheeks flushing slightly at being caught unawares, but he quickly recovered with a dismissive wave. "Just routine business matters, my dear. Nothing to worry your pretty little head over." My smile didn't waver, but inside, I seethed at the blatant condescension. He truly believed I was some vapid, simpering trophy wife, blissfully ignorant of the depths of his deception. Well, he was in for a rude awakening. Once I presented this evidence to Jillian and the board, his pathetic dreams of wealth and status would be decimated, leaving me free to reclaim the life and autonomy he'd stolen. That night, as Mason slumbered beside me, I lay awake replaying his every vile act, his constant belittling and humiliation. The white-hot fury I'd suppressed for so long burned within me now, a righteous flame of retribution. He'd underestimated me at every turn, arrogantly assuming I'd cower and obey like a dutiful spouse. But I would have the last laugh, the ultimate revenge. By exposing his greed-fueled schemes, I would destroy the very thing he valued most, his inflated sense of power and prestige. Only then would I finally be free. The boardroom crackled with tension as the leadership team assembled. I avoided Mason's narrowed gaze, focusing instead on the manila folder cradled in my lap, the evidence that would finally bring his reign of terror crashing down. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Jillian began, her tone clipped and all business. "I've called this emergency session to address some concerning allegations regarding potential financial improprieties." Murmurs rippled through the room as I rose, clutching the folder like a lifeline. All eyes turned towards me, a mixture of confusion and trepidation on the familiar faces. "I regret to inform you," my voice rang out steady and assured, "that we have an active threat operating within our ranks, one that jeopardizes not only our bottom line, but the integrity of this entire company." Silence hung heavy as I produced a sheaf of documents, letting them flutter onto the polished table with a dull thud. These records clearly indicate a systematic effort to siphon funds from our accounts into private offshore holdings. I let the weight of my words sink in before delivering the final blow. An effort spearheaded by none other than Mason Carson, under the guise of maximizing our family's wealth. A chorus of gasps and mutters erupted as all eyes swiveled towards my shell-shocked husband. His tanned face had gone ashen, that perpetual veneer of smug confidence finally shattered. You vile woman," he sputtered, rising unsteadily to his feet. "How dare you make these slanderous accusations against me, your own husband?" I held up a hand, silencing his bluster. With a few deft taps on my tablet, the unmistakable sound of his voice filled the room. The damning phone call I'd recorded, every incriminating word preserved for perpetuity. Mason's mouth worked soundlessly as the audio played out, desperation and disbelief warring across his features. Around the table, expressions shifted from shock to outright disgust and condemnation. When the recording finally clicked off, I fixed him with a look of pure vindicated contempt. "I dare, Mason, because you left me no choice. Your greed and entitlement blinded you to the truth that I would never be the passive, obedient wife you tried to mold me into." He opened his mouth, no doubt to spew more hollow denials and manipulations. But I pressed on, relentless. This reign of physical and psychological abuse ends today. I'm taking back control of my life, my career, my future, and there's nothing you can do to stop me. For a breathless moment, the room hung suspended in icy stillness. Then Gillian cleared her throat, her voice laced with steel. Well said, Maddie. Thank you for your candid testimony. She turned her hawkish gaze towards the man who had once been my husband. Mr. Carson, I regret to inform you that all business dealings between this company and your interests are hereby terminated, effective immediately. You'll be receiving formal correspondence from our legal team shortly. A muscle twitched in Mason's jaw as the stark reality settled in, his dreams of wealth and status obliterated in one fell swoop. All his scheming and deception had been for naught. You. His voice trembled with a potent mixture of rage and fear. You'll regret this, Maddie. I promise you that. If I can't have your money and prestige, I'll make damn sure you have nothing at all. A cruel smile twisted my lips as I stepped forward, every ounce of pent-up fury and resentment burning in my gaze. That's where you're wrong, Mason. I already have everything I need, my freedom, my self-respect, all the things your money could never buy. I leaned closer, savoring the acrid scent of his failure. This was never about money. It was about control. And now it's about my rebirth, while you wither and decay into the insignificance you've always feared most. His face contorted with impotent rage, but 2 security guards were already closing in to escort him out. As he was led away in disgrace, our eyes met one final time. There would be no forgiveness, no absolution in his future. He'd made his choice to become the architect of his own demise, and I would savor my hard-won victory with every breath. The modest 1-bedroom apartment felt like a sanctuary after the opulent prison I'd escaped. Unpacking the few belongings I'd salvaged, I savored the sense of lightness, of rebirth. No more lavish trappings weighing me down. No more toxic reminders of the life Mason had tried to force upon me. This fresh start was mine alone to shape. A soft knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. Coming! I swung it open to find Sandra's warm, familiar smile, a welcome tether to the past I was leaving behind. Well, the elusive Maddie Carson finally emerges from her fortress of solitude. She enveloped me in a tight hug, or should I say, the incredible shrinking woman? This place is a far cry from your usual digs. I laughed, the genuine sound still feeling foreign after so much emotional turmoil. You know me, always one for understatement. Ushering her inside, I poured 2 glasses of crisp white wine, a small indulgence, but one that felt decadent in my newly pared-down life. Sandra accepted her glass with an approving nod. I have to admit, I didn't think you'd actually go through with divorcing that snake. You always did have a stubborn streak, though. A rueful smile tugged at my lips as I settled onto the worn sofa. Believe me, leaving wasn't even the hard part. Watching Mason's entire world crumble around him, that's what made it all worthwhile. Her brows arched in silent question, and I launched into a detailed recounting of that fateful board meeting. With each new revelation, the incriminating evidence, Mason's spectacular downfall, her eyes grew wider. Damn, girl. She let out a low whistle as I concluded. I knew that bastard was rotten, but this? Taking millions from the company to fund his twisted power trip? That's a new low, even for him. I shrugged, sipping my wine. He made the mistake of underestimating me, thinking I was just another vapid trophy wife who'd roll over obediently. Sandra's gaze turned contemplative. So what now? I mean, with Mason out of the picture, you've got a clean slate. Any big plans for the new and improved Maddie 2.0? A devious grin played across my lips. Well, for starters, I'm taking that VP role Jillian dangled in front of me. She was so impressed by how I handled Mason's schemes, she's greenlighting my entire strategic vision for the company. Leaning forward, I confided in a conspiratorial murmur, and if things go according to plan over the next few years, I'll be in a prime position to take over as CEO when Jillian finally retires. Sandra's jaw dropped. You're shitting me. You'd be running the whole show? I simply arched an eyebrow, reveling in her stunned delight. The truth was, I'd never allowed myself to dream that big before, not with Mason's constant efforts to belittle and contain my ambitions. But now, flushed with the taste of hard-won freedom, the sky was the limit. Leaning back, I swirled the crisp liquid in my glass, pondering. This is just the beginning, Sandra. I'm done playing by anyone else's rules, done letting others dictate the course of my life. My gaze sharpened, a renewed sense of purpose blazing within me. From now on, I make my own destiny, and I'll start by showing this city what a real woman of power looks like. As the words left my lips, I knew they weren't just empty bravado. They were an unshakable vow, a searing promise to myself. No more half measures or compromises. After surviving the crucible of Mason's torment, I'd been reforged into an indomitable force, a woman who would never again let anyone or anything threaten her autonomy. My rebirth had begun, and this new life was mine for the taking.